This is a short presentation that will outline for you how to follow the lab sheet for week 4, where we're creating a short XML file, and this is designed to help you to start working on your own XML project. And so you have the basics here in this little presentation. So we're on the Notepad++ page, and this lab sheet is based around using Notepad++ as your editor for your XML project. So you can download Notepad++ from the notepad++.org website. And the good thing about Notepad++ is that it recognizes XML and will be able to you'll be able to use it as an editor, and so it's better than a too light Notepad for the same purpose. So this is what the interface looks like. It's quite basic, and we're going to begin by going to the language menu and clicking on XML from that menu to set the language as XML, and that will ensure that we can now use XML and it will recognize our tags. So the first thing that we're going to do is type in a few lines of code that we can explain. So the first line is XML version equals 1.0, encoding equals UTF-8, standalone equals no. What that first line means is that we're using the 1.0 version of the language, that it supports Unicode characters, and that it's not a standalone document because there are two other documents that we're using with this. One of them is our cascading style sheet, and the other is our document type definition. So the second line of code simply explains that we're using CSS as the formatting language, and that our CSS file is called practice.css. And likewise, the third line simply explains that we have a DTD and that it's called practice.dtd. Now when you're setting up your own XML file, you can copy these 3 lines of code, but do ensure that you type the actual name of your file rather than simply copying practice.css and practice.dtd. Your files will probably have more intuitive names that, for example, would include your student number, but ensure that the file name is enclosed in quotes so that it is recognized. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to add some elements and some text within those elements to this file. So the type of file that I'm creating is a checklist, and therefore I am calling the main element checklist. So you can see that I have a tag called checklist and a closing tag also called checklist, and that's the overall document type, and so there will be certain formatting text associated with that in my CSS. Next I have a heading, body and bullet elements. Now I've called these names that are akin to maybe formatting information that would be associated with them, but in fact I could call these anything. These element names don't mean anything to anyone except me, and they only take on a meaning in terms of formatting when we attach a style to them in the CSS. So at the moment, heading 1 is just my element name for the main heading, body is my element name for any body text, and bullet is my element name for any bullet text. You can see that again there are opening and closing tags, and because we're using an editor that recognizes XML tags, it selects both opening and closing tags, and we'll parse before we run a document to make sure that we have both opening and closing tags for all our tags, and to make sure that the XML is sound, or that it's acceptable and that it will run. So the next thing that we're going to do is save this basic XML file. Now you can see that there's text inside several of these tags that will be formatted according to the CSS style requirements for that particular element. So we're going to save the file by going to the File menu, clicking on Save As, And a couple of things are important here. Firstly, be sure to give the file a name that you will remember. I'm just going to call mine practice. Secondly, make sure that it is saving as an XML file. If you've selected XML as the language, this should happen automatically. And thirdly, make sure to check that you're saving it in a folder where you will be able to find the content when you need to find it. So we're going to save this file in a folder that I've called XML practice. Now my one already exists, so I'm just going to replace that. It's important then later that when you create your CSS file and your DTD file that you save those to the same location so that they're able to call on each other, or if not, that you type in the full directory information for those files into your first lines of code so that the XML document is able to find the CSS and the DTD. Now the next thing that we're going to do is create a cascading style sheet to go with this XML document. We're not going to create a DTD in this mini tutorial, though I will put a sample DTD in the resources folder in Solus for you. So to create a new file, a CSS file, we go to the File menu and click on New. Now you'll notice a handy toggle feature or tab feature in Notepad++ where you can toggle between any files that you have open. So we have our practice XML there that we can go back to, and we have this new file that we're going to change the language for. So the last time we set the language as XML for the practice document. This time we're going to set the language as CSS. So you go to the language menu, point to C this time, and click on CSS from the drop down menu. So now we're creating a CSS file. Now what we're going to do in this file is add formatting information for each of the elements. Now I'll put some resources on CSS into Solus for you because I've only used some basic formatting information. But you need to be sure first of all that you type the element name, that you then put opening curly brackets and type the name of the element that you want to insert formatting for, or the name of the type of formatting that you want to insert, and then the features of that formatting. So for example, we have a 100 pixel margin around the whole document. We've set a background color, we've set a font family. I have included a background image for the checklist element, which is simply called flagpoles.jpg. Now it's important that if you include any images for any of the elements, those image files also need to be stored in the same location as your CSS and your XML and DTD files. Background repeat simply means that we're not repeating any background information, and we've set some background position information as well. So some other CSS that is useful is display block, which just ensures that that element displays as a full block. If you want to indent any text, as I have done for the body text, you can use the text indent code. If you want to set other colors, for example for the heading, I have set it on a white background so that it will appear different to the background color of the main checklist document. You might want to set the font size, and if you're doing a list, you need to have certain formatting information associated with that list. So that's a very basic CSS file that only includes 4 elements. You would be expected to have more elements in the assignment that you produce. Next, we're going to save this file. So we go to the File menu, click on Save As, and again make sure to save it to a location that you're going to recognize, and to make sure that it is being saved as Cascade Style Sheets file. So make sure you save it in a location that you remember, but also in the same location that you have saved your other files, and click on Save. Again, mine already exists, so I'm just going to replace it this time. Now the next thing we're going to do is to verify that this file is running and that it would run on, for example, a browser, which is one way to output it. So we go back into our practice XML document and we go to the Run menu, and I'm going to launch it in Chrome. So you click on Launch in Chrome, and I'm just going to resize my Chrome so that I can see what the final XML document looks like. And we notice a few things that are we had formatted in our CSS files. So for example, I had put a white background for my heading text. We had a teal color background set for the checklist itself, and an image set for the checklist itself. And we had also indented body text and set bullets to display in a particular style. So this is quite a basic XML file and how it looks in Chrome. You will probably do something that has more content, more elements, and is more complex, but this short presentation should give you the tools that you need to begin working on this assignment.